Imagine this, it's 3 a.m. You're in your bed, barely asleep, but something feels off. Your chest is tight. Your pulse is in your ears. You open your eyes, and there, just at the edge of your doorway, is someone standing. Still. Quiet. Watching. The faint glow of the streetlight outside casts their silhouette into your room. You think it's a bad dream, so you blink. Hard. But they're still there. Their long hair hanging like a curtain, their head tilted slightly, as if they're thinking about something. You want to scream, but your voice is caught somewhere between your fear and your throat. And then, just as you gather enough courage to sit up, their hand moves, a glint of steel catching the light. A knife. And you realize, they've been standing there for a while. Watching you. That was Mandy. The timid, quiet girl who moved into my apartment just 2 months ago. The friend I wanted to help. But let me tell you, nothing could have prepared me for what she became. When Mandy first moved in, I thought I was doing the right thing. She needed help. A place to stay. And I've always believed in second chances. She was soft-spoken, almost fragile, and she had this look in her eyes that begged for kindness. I didn't know it then, but kindness can be dangerous. When Mandy first moved in, I didn't think twice about it. She needed a place, and I had an extra couch. She was shy, soft-spoken, the kind of person who seemed grateful for even the smallest kindness. She apologized too much for things that didn't matter and always said thank you, like she was afraid to take up space. At first, it was nice having her around. I work nights, so it was comforting knowing someone was in the apartment when I wasn't. She even offered to feed my cats while I was gone. It felt good, you know, to help someone who'd been dealt a tough hand. The first night she stayed, I barely noticed her. She was so quiet, so careful. I came home late and found her curled up on the couch with a blanket I'd left out. She was watching some old black and white movie on mute, sipping coffee. She gave me this little wave and whispered, "Hope I didn't wake you." She hadn't. Not that night. But by the third or fourth night, something started to feel different. It was the little things at first. The sound of her walking around the apartment at odd hours, the smell of coffee brewing at 3 in the morning. I'd come out of my room, bleary-eyed, and there she'd be, sitting at the counter, staring into her mug. She'd always say the same thing when I asked why she was up so late: "I just couldn't sleep." I'd try to brush it off. People have their habits, right? But it wasn't just the coffee. She left pieces of herself everywhere, long black strands of hair tangled in the drain, clumps of it on the bathroom floor, nail clippings on the edge of the sink. I remember stepping on one barefoot once, sharp as a thorn. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. I mean, we all shed, don't we? But then there were my cats. They loved people, always did. The kind of cats that would climb into a stranger's lap without hesitation. But with Mandy? They'd freeze in the doorway, staring at her like she was something they couldn't figure out. After a while, they stopped going near her altogether. They wouldn't even leave my bedroom unless they had to eat or use the litter box. I asked her about it once, why they might be acting so skittish. She laughed, but it didn't sound like she thought it was funny. She said something like, maybe they don't like the smell of cigarettes, and went back to whatever she was doing. And then there was the silence. Mandy had this way of disappearing, even when she was right there. She'd sit on the couch, not reading, not watching TV, just sitting. She wouldn't move for what felt like hours, barely breathing, staring at the wall like it had something to tell her. I'd catch myself holding my breath around her sometimes, waiting for her to say or do something. But she never did. Not in those moments. She just sat there, so still it was like she wasn't even there at all. But the thing is, she was there. Every night, I'd hear her moving around while I was trying to sleep. The creak of floorboards, the soft click of the bathroom door, the hiss of the kettle. Sometimes it sounded like she was whispering, but when I'd get up to check, she'd just smile and say, "Sorry if I woke you." I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Mandy was dealing with her own struggles, and I didn't want to make her feel bad for being different. But the nights got longer, and the apartment felt smaller, and the sound of her coffee maker started to feel like it was meant to wake me. I'd ask her, as nicely as I could, to wait until morning to brew her coffee. She'd always promise, always smile, and always do it again the next night. It's strange how quickly things can change without you noticing. One minute, you're offering someone a couch. The next, you're lying awake at night, wondering why your cats won't leave your room and why the air in your own apartment feels off. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself she was just Mandy. But there's only so much you can ignore before you start to realize something's wrong. Really wrong. It started happening without me noticing at first. Little things. Too small to make sense of, but enough to make you feel like something wasn't right. I thought I was just tired, you know? Long shifts, a restless mind, the constant waking up to Mandy at odd hours. I was starting to lose sleep, and with it, my grip on reality. It wasn't just the noises anymore. It wasn't just the odd glances or the way she'd move around the apartment when I wasn't looking. It was the feeling of being watched. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and swear I saw shadows moving in the corner of my eyes. Not just any shadows, shadows that didn't match the shapes they were supposed to be. Tall, elongated, stretching when nothing should be stretching. They'd flit across the walls when I wasn't paying attention, only to disappear when I turned my head. I'd stare at the wall, telling myself it was nothing. But the whispers started. Soft at first, like a breeze brushing against your ear. Not words. No, they were more like feelings. Unsettling, cold things that pressed against my mind when I lay still in bed. I'd hear them when I woke up at night, always just before I closed my eyes again. They sounded like Mandy's voice. But then, they weren't. I asked myself if I was losing my mind. I'd had insomnia for so long, the kind of sleeplessness that gnaws at you, that bends the way you see things. But it wasn't just the whispers, the shadows. It was her. Mandy. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I decided to do something. I had to know. So, I asked one of my old friends about her. I asked about the eviction. I'd heard bits and pieces from Mandy, but something didn't sit right with me. The eviction story seemed off. The details didn't add up. She'd said it was a misunderstanding, but was that really the case? I was in the kitchen when my friend finally texted me back. Mandy wasn't evicted because of a misunderstanding. She broke into her neighbor's apartment, with a knife. I froze. The words didn't register at first. A knife. The whole world seemed to pause around me. The floor under my feet felt different. Like everything had just shifted. I needed more. I needed to know what happened. So, I asked again, and my friend told me what had happened that night. Mandy had entered the apartment of a couple who lived a few floors below us. The man had woken up to find her standing by his baby's crib, holding a knife. The father had wrestled her to the ground. He managed to keep her from hurting the child. But Mandy wasn't arrested for it. They said it was a psychotic break. She didn't remember what happened. She was evicted anyway, and the police report mentioned she'd been having episodes before. That's when it hit me. The Mandy I'd let into my life, the woman I thought was so timid, so fragile, wasn't who I thought she was. I didn't say anything to her right away. I couldn't. My mind raced, piecing everything together, even the smallest things. The knife that had gone missing from my kitchen, the way she'd stared at me sometimes, like she knew something I didn't. I knew I had to confront her. But how? The next morning, when she was sitting in the living room, sipping her coffee, I knew it was time. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't back down. "Mandy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need you to leave." She didn't blink. She didn't even move. Just sat there, staring at me with those wide eyes. Her hand gripped the mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. "It's not working," I said, my voice shaking now. I can't live like this. You need to go." I tried to keep it calm. To keep it rational. I'd been kind to her. But this wasn't normal anymore. This wasn't the same Mandy who had come in so quietly, so shy. This was someone else. Someone I didn't understand. She didn't speak at first. She just smiled. A smile so soft, so slow, that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Her eyes never left mine, not even once. And that smile, there was something wrong with it. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice like ice. It was flat. "You don't have a choice," I said, my voice cracking. "You have to leave. I don't know what's going on with you, but I can't stay here with you anymore." She tilted her head. Just like that night, when she'd been sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. "You're being rude," she said, a little too calm. "I don't want to leave." There was a flicker in her eyes, something wild, something sharp. It wasn't Mandy anymore. I took a step back, my hands suddenly cold. "You have to leave," I repeated. I didn't even recognize my own voice, it was like a foreign thing, pleading with her. I knew I had to do it, but the words felt like they were coming from somewhere far away. She stood up slowly. There was no hurry in her movements, no rush. She walked past me, brushing her shoulder against mine. Her presence felt like it was pressing down on me, like I couldn't breathe properly. "I'll stay for as long as I want," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "And you'll deal with it." I could feel the sweat pooling at the back of my neck as she walked away. I didn't move. I couldn't. But when I turned around, when I reached the door to my bedroom, the sight in front of me made my stomach drop. There, on the floor by the kitchen counter, was a knife. Not one of mine, but a kitchen knife. The sound of metal scraping against tile echoed in the back of my mind. I stood there, frozen, unable to look away from it. I didn't hear her footsteps anymore. All I could hear was my own breath, fast and shallow. And then the whispers started again. Not outside the walls, not from the apartment, but in my head. Over and over. "You'll deal with it." Every night, the whispers grew louder. And the shadows, they weren't shadows anymore. They were something else. Something that followed me, something that watched me in the corners of my eyes. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I just knew that Mandy was here. And she wasn't leaving. It was late. Later than usual. The kind of late where the world feels different, quieter, heavier, like even time itself has slowed down. I'd gone to bed early, hoping for once to get a decent night's sleep. But sleep wasn't something I found easily anymore. Not with Mandy in the apartment. I don't even know what woke me at first. Maybe it was a sound, or maybe it was nothing at all. But I opened my eyes, and there was this feeling, this sharp, pressing awareness that I wasn't alone. I didn't want to look, not at first. I just stared at the ceiling, telling myself it was my imagination. But then I felt it, a weight, like someone's gaze pressing down on me. Slowly, I turned my head toward the door. She was standing there. Mandy. She was framed in the doorway, her long black hair hanging in front of her face. The light from the hallway flickered, maybe a bulb about to go out, maybe something else. The shadows cast by the movement made her look even taller, her frame blending into the darkness around her. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body locked up, frozen in place. She didn't say anything. She didn't move, either. Just stood there, her head tilted slightly forward, her hands hanging limply at her sides. I tried to find my voice. I wanted to ask her what she was doing, why she was standing there. But the words wouldn't come out. My throat felt dry, like I'd swallowed sand. Then she took a step forward. Just one step. The light flickered again, and I could see her face, just a glimpse of it through her hair. Her eyes weren't right. They were wide, glassy, unblinking, staring straight at me. "Mandy," I whispered, barely able to hear my own voice. What are you doing?" She didn't answer. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I didn't dare move any further. She was still just standing there, her head tilting to one side like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then, without a word, she turned and walked away. I stayed frozen for a few minutes, just staring at the doorway, expecting her to come back. But all I heard was her footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward the kitchen. And then, the smell hit me. It was sharp, acrid, burning. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out. When I reached the kitchen, there she was. Mandy, standing at the stove. She had a frying pan in her hand, and in the pan was coffee, just coffee grounds, dry and smoking, the edges catching fire and sending thick, black smoke curling into the air. "Mandy!" I yelled, coughing as the smoke filled my lungs. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me. She just stood there, holding the handle of the pan, staring at the flames as they grew larger. The smoke was unbearable, thick and choking. My eyes stung, and I could barely see. I grabbed a dish towel and tried to wave the smoke away, shouting her name over and over. Finally, she turned to look at me. Her face was blank. Not angry, not sad, not confused. Just empty, like there was no one there. "Put it out!" I shouted. "Mandy, you're going to burn the apartment down." Still, she didn't move. The flames climbed higher, licking at the edges of the pan. I lunged forward, grabbing the frying pan out of her hands. The heat burned my palm, but I didn't care. I threw it into the sink and turned on the water, the fire hissing and spitting as it went out. When I turned back around, Mandy was standing in the middle of the kitchen, watching me. And then I saw it. She was holding a knife. It wasn't one of mine. It was bigger, the blade glinting in the dim light. "You need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. I tried to keep my distance, to keep the counter between us. She didn't answer. "Mandy, please," I begged. "You have to leave. I can't do this anymore." She took a step forward, the knife still in her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. Her voice was calm, too calm, like this was a normal conversation. I backed up, my hand searching for my phone on the counter behind me. My fingers found it, and I grabbed it as quickly as I could. "I'll call the police," I said, my voice shaking. "I swear to God, Mandy. Put the knife down." She tilted her head again, that same unnatural tilt. And then she smiled. "You wouldn't," she said. I didn't answer. I turned and bolted down the hallway, slamming my bedroom door behind me and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called my friend, barely able to form the words. "Come over," I whispered. "Please. Now." I could hear her outside, moving around. Her footsteps were slow and deliberate, the sound of them making my chest tighten. And then, the whispers started again. Not from outside the room this time. From right outside the door. "You'll deal with it," she said softly. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, clutching my phone like it was the only thing keeping me alive. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but when my friend finally arrived, Mandy was gone. She'd left the knife in the kitchen, the blade still wet, though I didn't want to think about what it had touched. And that was the night I knew I wasn't safe anymore. She left the next day. It wasn't easy. Nothing with Mandy ever was. She didn't pack, didn't argue, didn't even say much. She just sat in the living room, staring out the window like she always did. The sunlight came through the curtains, but it didn't touch her. She looked like she belonged to another time, another place. When I finally worked up the courage to speak, my words came out shaky. "I need the keys, Mandy." She turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting mine. There wasn't anger in them. No sadness, either. Just stillness. "I'll leave," she said, her voice soft and even. She stood, walked to the table, and placed the keys down with deliberate care. For a moment, I thought that was it. That she'd just walk out and disappear like a bad memory. But then, as she reached the door, she paused. "I'll miss you," she whispered, her back still turned to me. And then she turned her head just enough for me to see her smile. Not a warm, friendly smile. Not even a cruel one. It was empty, quiet, like a shadow stretching across her face. She opened the door and stepped out without another word. I stood there for a long time after she left. My chest felt tight, like I hadn't been breathing for hours. The apartment was silent, finally silent, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt wrong. I checked every room after she was gone, looking for something, anything, she might have left behind. I wanted to make sure she hadn't hidden anything, hadn't left me some kind of message. Every drawer, every cabinet, every corner of the apartment. When I opened the closet in the living room, I found her jacket. I don't know why it sent a chill down my spine, but it did. I left it there. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. For a few days, I thought it was over. But then, I got a call from one of our mutual friends. "Did you hear about Mandy?" she asked. Her voice was trembling, barely above a whisper. "No," I said, my stomach tightening. "What happened?" She burned down her apartment." The words didn't make sense at first. I stood there, gripping the phone, trying to understand. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She poured lighter fluid everywhere," my friend said, her voice cracking. "She told the police she had to burn everything. That she had to save her baby. But Mandy doesn't have a baby. She's in custody now. They're saying it was a psychotic break." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of Mandy's life, the things she'd told me, the things I'd seen. The knife. The whispers. The way she stared at me like I wasn't really there. The fire hadn't just destroyed her apartment. It had spread to the ones next to it. Families had to be evacuated in the middle of the night. The report said Mandy had fought off neighbors who tried to stop her, running back into the flames to pour more lighter fluid. She could have died. Maybe she wanted to. I thought about the nights she spent in my apartment, the times she stood in my doorway, the things she said and didn't say. The look in her eyes. It was only later, when I was alone, that it hit me. The knife she'd held that night wasn't hers. It wasn't mine, either. It was new, its blade too clean, too polished. She must have brought it with her. That's when I realized how close I'd come to. I don't even want to say it. For weeks after she left, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment felt too loud, too close. Every shadow on the wall looked like her, standing there, watching me. I tried to explain it to my friends, but they didn't understand. They sympathized with her, said she'd been through so much, that it wasn't her fault. And maybe they're right. Maybe it wasn't. But they didn't see her the way I did. They didn't hear the whispers. They didn't feel her standing in the doorway at 3 a.m., her hair hanging in her face, her silence heavier than words. They didn't know what it was like to lie in bed, too afraid to close your eyes because you didn't know what you'd see when you opened them. I still think about Mandy sometimes. I wonder where she is, what she's doing. If she's getting the help she needs. If she even remembers me. But more than that, I wonder about the choices I made. About the line between kindness and self-preservation. I wanted to help her. I wanted to be the person who made a difference in her life. But sometimes, wanting to help isn't enough. Sometimes, the people you think you're saving are the ones who can destroy you. And sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't the ones you fear. They're the ones you welcome into your home. If you think you know fear, think again. Mandy's story isn't just about what happens when trust is misplaced, it's about the chilling realization that danger can come from the most unexpected places. What would you do if someone you invited into your home turned your life into a waking nightmare? Watch the full story and discover just how thin the line between compassion and survival really is. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Could you have seen the signs? Hit subscribe for more tales that will keep you awake at night.